Hey everybody, so in this video we are going to run over IK and FK joint systems. So I will be sharing my screen here. And so what we're going to be building, we're going to be building an IK leg and an FK arm. And real quick, I'm going to show you guys how to drop in those joints to build this for your own in-class example or to just figure out how to connect them up. But I'm going to show you how to connect them real quick. So we have an arm and a leg. We're going to jump into the, this is side X view, and just going to start dropping these in. A Fortnite example that you guys will see, I have has a few more bones in the feet, but we're just going to worry about the top of the upper leg, the knee, the ankle, and basically the toe of the foot. So then you're just going to drop it in and adjust some of the angle accordingly. A lot of your models may be built straight up and down, but this particular model we're referencing is in an A pose. And so we have a slight offset in the limbs. So we also need to make sure you have a hip joint that you are connecting to for the IK system to work. So here we have our hip. Just going to center this correctly. And then we have our leg. And we, so you always want to make sure you name them. I'm not going to do this for this example, but I'm just going to show you really quickly how to put them all together. So you have hip at the top, then the flow goes correctly down. We want to make sure that the top of the upper leg, the left upper leg, is not the top of the hierarchy. We want to make sure it's underneath the hip. So it tries from hip to leg. So then if you had both legs, it would work. Then for the arm, we're going to jump to the forward front Z view. And we are going to drop in the shoulder, then the elbow, then the wrist. So this one's just going to have 3 joints. And also, I forgot to say, we're going to freeze the transformations on this one. Because before you start rigging, you want 0 rotation values in all of your joints. You can have them in translates or scaling is okay, but generally we always want to make sure zeros rotate and scale is 1 when you're building your base skeleton. So we just quickly dropped in the spacing of those joints, and as we can see, since we built it on the front plane, the elbow and everything's not in the correct spot. So we will get that fixed right now. So there's 2 ways to go about it. We're going to move this one, so just translating it. And you can either, then we're going to rotate this one, make sure he's in the right position. And it looks like our wrist is just a little bit short, but that's totally normal. Another way you can move joints. So say there was a hand attached to this wrist, and if you translate, it moves the entire, like the wrist joint, and we don't want that. We just want this elbow joint to move. You're going to hit the D key or the insert key, and then you can adjust the position of where the joint is without affecting any of the translations or rotations further downstream. So it's really nice. So you can flip in and out with D key or the insert key. That will become your best friend as a rigger. And since this one's at the end, we don't need to worry about that too much. So just making sure everything's placed correctly. And then if you were to skin and bind it, you just select the joint and then select the joint right here, and then select the body. And of course, flip into your rigging tab or to skin, bind skin. I'm just double checking to make sure my settings are right and reset them. For this particular model, since it's all in chunks, I would set it as selected joints. So if I was to bind it, I would select the hip, then the hip joint, or the hip joint, then the hip body piece, then the upper leg, and then that body piece. Or by default, you can do joint hierarchy. You'll just have to make sure you go in and paint some of the influences, or things will be a little skew-wompy. So that's how you place joints. Super simple, super quick. And we can see how they are going to all like toggle their axes and whatnot. just to make sure everything's, the flow is going well. So in this particular leg, we have the Y flipping quite a bit. That's just done by default. So I'm just going to hit apply to force. So it forces the X as the main primary axis, and then it adjusts most of the Y to be on the similar ones. But so sometimes you may have to play with this. I will do a more in-depth video about gimbal lock and kind of the issues of what that is and how to avoid it. But we're not going to worry too much about that today. So I'm going to toggle those off. And real quick, we are going to flip over to our model here to talk about IK and FK systems. So they're super, IK, FK are your bread and butter. And so this will be as if you've already put in your joints and everything good to go. I will real quickly show just like the orientation on those so you guys can see what is happening under the hood. And so a lot of their orientations are a little bit different. So most of the Y and the offsets are a little bit more than what I would think, but I just pulled these joints directly off of a different rig, or off of the rig of her. They are going to be driving her actual joints in her rig, but we're just worrying about in the class, we're just worrying about these ones I pulled out. So to build an IK leg is super easy. So you're going to pick these joints with, it kind of looks like a rubber band connecting to them. So it says create IK handle. And for the knee in particular, there's two types we'll be working with: single chain solvers and rotate plane solvers. So single chains, you use those a lot in things where you don't need a pull vector to control where that elbow or that knee is going to be pointing all times. They're very nice for a lot of things like feet and clavicles and just kind of like smaller sections. So like 2 or 3 joints instead of like a whole knee that needs to rotate and act like a leg. So we're going to do a rotate plane solver. And how you create it. So the tool's active. You're going to select the top joint, so where you want it, and the bottom. So we're going to hit right here at this ankle bone and ignoring the ball of the foot and the toe. We're going to ignore those. So just from, I have the upper leg selected to the leg here. So now we can see we have it moving. But now we need to connect this up to our controls and get it up to our knee pull vector so everything is correct in alignment. So we're also for legs, so you don't really have to do this for arms, but for legs, we're going to also add a single chain solver in the foot. And I'll show you guys why. So I'm going to select the control for the foot that I created, open it up in my outliner. So I just hit the F. Then we're just going to parent the control underneath the IK handle so that when we move the foot control, the IK handle will move. And as you can see, we're hitting some issues here where the knee is really struggling to calculate which way its vector needs to go. And this foot should stay completely stationary. It shouldn't be moving like this, so that if we wanted to like tap it or whatever, it would, but we're having issues. So we will fix that really quickly right here. So first of all, I'm just going to freeze some transforms because there are things are going on there. I'm going to bring that underneath. And then we're going to create. So we're going to go back to our rigging tab. We're going to double select. So our tool settings come up. We're going to do a single chain solver. We're going to click from ankle to the toe of the foot. And you can actually have multiple IKs connect to different joints. So like the first one, its effector is it starts at the upper leg, as we can see here, and where this one is more of like ending. Anyway, as you get into it more, you can have them overlap. So now when we bring the second IK handle underneath the foot controls, we're gonna name the first one, we'll do L for left leg IK handle. Then we're going to do left for leg, and then we're going to do foot IK handle. So now when we rotate that foot, moves accordingly to what we kind of need it to. And there's tons of different foot setups and things, but we're not going to worry about that today. And the leg is more reacting to the way we need it. But the knee is still an issue. So I've created, all the files will have this L pull vector knee plane. So there's an angle already automatically like built into the leg just of the way it's facing and things. And so if this pull vector is not in alignment, it does some weird stuff. So I'll show you what that is. So immediately hold on, sorry. Let me hide this. Then we are going to select the knee control and we are going to create this button right here is the pull vector. So immediately that knee rotates in. We don't want that. That will create problems later down the road of if you're unbinding and binding stuff. We want that to be immediately in alignment as soon as you get that constraint. So that's what this plane is for, is to make sure that it's all in alignment, like the natural just vectors and everything are there. So I'm going to turn it on to make it a live surface, and I'm going to grab the top group of this and just snap it to this surface. So it's running across the surface. And the arrow itself doesn't need to be in alignment. That's just kind of a cosmetic thing. So I'm going to turn that off, hide this, select the pull vector in the knee, and then, or the controls, sorry, and then the IK handle, and then ta-da! So now, as we move, that knee will rotate accordingly to where we need it to go. And so if you're like running or squatting, our character here, we can pull out that knee, have it come out further so it's not like folding in upon itself, and we can get it to go wherever we need. So that's how you do a simple IK. And here's also where the hip is really important. If we were to kind of grab things at this joint, just sometimes weird, if you were to add a constraint to this joint, weird things can happen. So you always want to make sure all your legs have a hip joint that it's coming off of, especially when there's two. It's just a really good practice. So we're going to select the control, and then we're going to select this hip joint, and we're going to hit this button for a parent constraint. So then wherever this control is, the rest of the hips will move accordingly. And we can get some beginning half animation of our Fortnite character here. And so hips are really important in rigs. They control a lot of the main body movement, where your center of gravity will be and whatnot. And so we are also really quick going to constrain the top of this shoulder FK group I've made. So the hip joints will drive where that group is. And so now we can see the controls are moving, but we haven't connected up the arm. So a little bit how the system here is set up. So you always want to make sure all your controls, the blue little squigglies, that stands for a curve, they have 0 values on there. We don't want any scales, rotates, or translate, because that's where all our animation keys will be on these values. And everything while we're building the rigs, like adjusting the controls so they have this nice angle, or nesting them, or different parenting them, that's where those values can be on the groups that are just settled right above it. So if I wanted to, I could, so that's why we parent constrained this left shoulder FK pad, because all these other controls are nested underneath. So then that's not directly on the controller, because that would, so having blue and red keys will create green, and that's really bad. But it's on upper, higher in the hierarchy, so we can like build all these different layers on top of everything and really create like a really nice system. And so from there, so I already set up the controls for you guys. They're pretty simple to just nest different curves underneath each other. You always want to make sure you have either, I have actually a script that will create these offsets or these pads for you, but you want to make sure you have those. So then just like there's different values can set where they need to set, and it won't affect your animation. So after that's created, you're just going to say, okay, top shoulder control here. We're going to select top shoulder joints. hit constrain, and you just kind of work. So this is a parent constraint. So that will include translation, rotation in it. So we can get kind of these movements, but that's not exactly what we need. Usually FK just really needs this one right here called a orient constraint. So you have point, so you have parent, point, orient, and scale. Point is just translate, orient is rotate. And so you usually aren't very often moving it in this direction for FK. Sometimes animators want it, but just for simplicity's sake, we're just going to also do an orient constraint. So I deleted all the parent constraints, and now we're just working on the orient constraints. So you can select the two, and then you can use the G key to just repeat the last command. And that will then allow our arm, now when we move it, it has the rotations that we need, but it doesn't include translation, which is exactly what we want. So, oops, we are almost there. So, okay, so here's a good example of actually why I might delete that orient constraint. So you can delete constraints all you want, back and forth. It's super nice. So this is an example of redoing and doing things again. So we're going to actually make that a parent constraint. And now when the hips move, it will take in consideration that. So how that works, even though like this leg isn't connected to this arm, this hip control is driving the group that the shoulder is underneath. So all those controls are, and that includes translate and orient. And so this particular controller also says, hey, wherever you are in translate space or rotation space, like basically come along with me, constrain with me. And so that's why we did a parent constraint there, so that wherever it translates, even if like the animator's not animating it, but the rest of the rig moves, the arm moves with it too. So that is the simple setups for IK and FK. There's a lot more complexity to these setups and in the way of adding them together. So there's multiple chains and switches and whatnot. It's a really beautiful thing. It's really simple, and you will redo and redo it again and again. But that is just the way, kind of the way how rigging is done. And so I hope this video will be helpful for you guys. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out to me. Thanks.